at the date of this podcast
Yeah.
is that HRT works better as prevention versus treatment.
Sure.
And what we're understanding too more and more is that it's not just, and that's in terms of risk, in terms of side effects. But I cannot emphasize this enough. You have to work with a qualified practitioner. If you do not work with a qualified practitioner, you may not feel good. You're going to have side effects. You need somebody that's supportive, that can understand, because HRT is it's not like a crock pot. You can't just set it and forget it. Like you do have to go in for monitoring. You do have to make sure that your levels are where they need to be. You do need to make sure it's helping your symptoms. And I get asked this all the time. In fact, we have a quiz on our website that says, how do I know? It's called, actually, it's not your mother's menopause, but it's like, how do you know if I'm in perimenopause? I get this question all the time. And it's all these symptoms that are coming up.
Good morning and welcome to the Fusionary Health podcast. I'm Dr. Shivani Gupta, and this is the podcast dedicating to recalibrating your health every day. My goal is to help you wake up each day energized by addressing root causes and giving you new approaches to preventive health. The more we know about integrative health, the more empowered we are in building the vibrant health we want.
Welcome to the Fusionary Health podcast. So I have a very special guest for you in store today. If you have been listening to this podcast, you know that as a woman in her 40s, I'm very into the topic of perimenopause, and being a speaker in the health and wellness space for years, I hear a lot of complaints about menopause. And so I'm excited for our guest today. Welcome, Margot.
Hi. Hello. Thank you for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
Of course. And so will you share, I know you teach peri to post, which I think is a great way to say, I'm here to help you ladies through this big transition point or two that we all go through here. But will you share where you're from, where you live, your practice, your background, and a little bit about why this is your topic?
Yes, love this question. So my name is Margot Witteveen. I am a functional medicine dietitian, and I co-own a private practice. We are 100% virtual private practice, and we have a team of functional medicine dietitians. And we help women through foundational health, just like peri to post. And we work through foundational health. So we talk about nutrition. We really take a deep dive into nervous system support. In fact, I was just saying a second ago that what we've started doing with our clients is that we actually are starting with nervous system support, deep nervous system support, whether it's making sure you're eating enough, whether you're, not skipping breakfast, or are you sleeping enough? Are you dealing with trauma? Are you giving yourself self-compassion? Are you giving yourself self-love? So talking very deep nervous system support. And we do that along with our nutrition strategies and also with mineral supplementation, because we consider that foundational health. So we love minerals. If you end up following us on Instagram, you're going to see us talking a lot about minerals, but we're 100% virtual, and we work with women on one-on-one capacity and group programming.
Very cool. So what inspired you to become a dietitian?
So let's go back a little bit further. I have my undergraduate degree in chemistry, and I was going to go all the way, get my PhD. I was either going to do biochemistry and chemistry. And for me, I realized at the time, I kind of felt, in my early 20s, that bench work was maybe the only option. And I just didn't love that idea of being in a lab. I loved teaching. I loved learning. And I somehow just kind of weaved my way into learning about nutrition. And the school that I had offered a master's program in nutrition and offered a dietetic internship. And so I stayed on and I got my master's in nutrition. And then, of course, I met all the credentialing to become a registered dietitian. And it just kind of was one of those happenstance, like, oh, I can study nutrition. What is this about? And what I always tell people is that nutrition is not about meal planning and weight loss. I think that's a big misconception. Nutrition is a science. And so we have to understand what's happening on a biochemical level in our body. And it just kind of blended that heavy science, but also working with the individuals and teaching one-on-one, which is what I love to do so much.
This is so interesting. So you studied chemistry. You were interested in biochemistry that led you to study nutrition. When you study nutrition, you're reminding us that nutrition is in fact biochemistry, and it's the effect on the body that we're seeking. It's not just this world of weight loss and meal prep. I just want to say it's a profound thought in today's day and age, because so much of our culture has shifted us to thinking about food as fuel. Just get it in there. What diet are you on? What are you following? And how does it affect you? Are you following the diet that's good for you? Sometimes we put so much like discipline and wrangling onto food, completely forgetting that this is a body that has intelligence, that needs certain inputs. Is a very rough way to say it, but needs a variety and nutrient density and a lot of other factors to actually run well. And I wonder if that's why so many of us are suffering so heavily. Like when you say peri to post, I'm like, yeah, that's called, it's the main demographic, I would say, that's suffering so heavily. And then I also think that that's moving downstream because we're seeing, young women, painful periods. We're seeing endometriosis, PCOS, fibroids and cysts are more common, then infertility, pregnancy, and post-pregnancies. It's a huge topic of women's health. And then when we are finally done with all those phases, here we get to meet the new door. And we're like, what on earth?
So the hormonal chaos is real.
It really is. And it's frustrating. And I have been to multiple practitioners and I'm like, guys, just tell me the pill that'll solve the problem. And they laugh because they're like, there's never one pill. It's bigger than that. I'm like, you guys know I'm busy, right? I just need the pill. And they're like, yes, Ms. Queen of Lifestyle and Self-Care.
Yeah, it's hard, even for the busiest and the most well-intentioned. But, if I could touch a little bit on my chemistry background, and you don't have to just be a chemist to understand this, even if you're just a science person. But, when we talk about protein a lot with our clients, and as I think we're hearing more and more, especially on social media, just out there, how the importance of protein is, the RDA is really too low, which is what the government's guidelines are for individuals to consume. It's 0.8 grams per kilogram. It's really too low. We actually really need between 1 to 1.2 grams per kilogram. Now, that's getting a little bit into the weeds of what we need, but I just wanted to give some point of reference. But when we talk about protein is the building blocks. First of all, it's the building blocks for our neurotransmitters. And so we have to think about, are we eating enough to fuel our body on its most basic level? Right. And I don't think that we are, even though it may be well-intentioned, it may be, we may think that we're doing something because there's so much nutrition misinformation. So that's a lot of stuff that a lot of times what we spend with our clients is to dispel these myths. Should I be this? Should I follow that? Should I do this? And something that you'll enjoy for me to say is that I always tell my clients the best, quote unquote, best diet is one that's going to lower your inflammation.
Yep.
Is one that's going to balance your blood sugars.
Yes.
That you can follow pretty much 365 days out of the year. And it's going to support your hormones wherever phase that you're in. That is the quote unquote best diet. And when we break it down in those terms, we can look at optimizing, our blood sugar so we can reduce insulin resistance, we can support our body. And another thing that is really important to understand is that if we want to just take a quick segue into weight, because we tend to think of diets as equating to weight loss. Yeah. Sometimes we look at diets as optimizing health, but I think unfortunately we do look at a diet as the metric of success is weight loss. But I always say that the diet that we recommend is going to be the diet that's going to make you feel really good and it's going to support your hormones. Because if we get too restrictive with this calories in, calories out, which is a really antiquated way of looking at how our metabolism works, it makes our brain feel unsafe. And when the brain feels unsafe and it sees it as a threat, it will make you hold on to fat. And so we're looking at improving body composition. We have to make sure that we're keeping our brain safe. And anything that makes the brain feel unsafe is not eating enough, not sleeping enough, not balancing your blood sugars, not supporting your adrenals and your thyroids. There's so many things that make the brain feel unsafe, unhealed trauma. So we look at all of these aspects to help the brain feel safe so the body can function the way it needs to.
Let's talk about that for a moment, because it's honestly something I think about so much. As I look at my diet, my health, and everything, the biggest struggle I have is with my brain. And I think it's because the output we expect from ourselves is greater than ever before. I wake up and I check in with everything, email, social, everything okay? Okay, I've responded to everything urgent. Now it's kids to school, workout, work. The work day now is more intense than ever. Like, you want success, but success can mean like 200 times the output of things coming at you and opportunity. It all sounds great, but the body is still the same body that has to function under that pressure. And then I share with people sometimes that when I cut my day at 4 p.m., 5 p.m. and switch over to kid time, that's the toughest part of the day. That's negotiating with terrorists and trying to move them through a journey that nobody wants to listen. And that's, I find, the toughest time of the day, where if you're not on a specific mindset with your food, you will just start eating and reaching for the things. And I call it the witching hour now for moms, because I'm like, we've been too restrictive all day. The brain just needs its fuel. And so what are some of your tips to guide women? Because I know I think of it as healthy fat. I'm willing to try MCT oil at this point. I take brain formulas. I take turmeric to open up my blood flow to every access point in my body. But I'm curious what your thoughts are, because I think brain function, not having brain fog, having full access to your brain to like utilize all of your resources is a word for it, but like facets is a job. Like, I don't think we get to assume that we get to keep our brain health. And that's not even focusing on future dementia, Alzheimer's, brain health.
Oh, you just said it. You just said that last statement. We don't get to pick on, our brain just isn't where it is right now. So I think this is an excellent point, and that I really stress this to our clients, is that they come in with these, and I'm going to get to the brain part here, but I want to kind of set this up. They come to us saying, I'm having hot flashes, I'm gaining weight, these sort of, and they're not, I do not want to dismiss these symptoms, but these are what I call more surface symptoms. But what we're not focusing on is what's happening underneath the surface, which is bone health, cardiovascular health, and then brain health. Yeah. And to support our brains, let's actually talk about what's happening in this midlife. So if you are maybe in your late 30s, or even that you've hit your fourth decade or above, during this perimenopause time. And so perimenopause is the time before menopause. So you're still cycling, you're having fluctuations in estrogen, your progesterone is dropping, testosterone is dropping, but you're still cycling. Your brain is trying to say, so your brain actually dictates to the ovaries what is to happen. And it's all of a sudden thinking, wait a minute, your ovaries are saying, wait, I'm running out of eggs. I don't have enough of this energy to kind of keep this monthly function from happening. It's a lot of energy in our bodies to support a monthly cycle. Yeah. And the brain is going through an energy crisis. It's trying to, and so it's a bit of a recalibration, if you will. It's trying to think, oh, wait a minute, should we ovulate this month? Should we not ovulate this month? Do I need to give the estrogen? Do I not need to give the estrogen? What about the progesterone? But yet the follicles and the eggs are running out. So it's really kind of like, what the hell is going on here? And so that's why we feel this sort of the brain fog. It's a real thing. You forget words. I might forget a word on this podcast because I'm in that stage. You forget words. You walk into a room and you can't remember why you walked into that room, or you're like, what was that task? What was I going to do? Or who was I supposed to talk to? All of those things happen. And then they're happening at the busiest time of a woman's life. So the midlife is stressful. So you have this brain reorganization that's trying to get used to not having the estrogen and progesterone as much as it was used to. So we have to support our brain. Now, what we want it to do is you're going to have a little bit of brain fog, but what we hope happens is when you hit actually menopause, when you've actually gone that full year without a cycle, that hopefully the brain fog levels off. What we don't want to continue happening is it gets worse. And that's when we set ourselves up for dementia. So Dr. Mascani, if you haven't had a chance to read her book, The Menopause Brain, it was just published in March. Yeah. She says, she will say that actually dementia and Alzheimer's are a disease of midlife, but symptoms show up later in life, like in your 60s or 70s. So this is a critical time. This is a point of inflection in your health to start doing things to support your brain. So very simple things, balancing your blood sugars. So eating foods that have adequate amount of protein, adequate amount of fiber, healthy fats, and those good complex carbs. That's what you want to start with. You want to start with just the basics. We don't want to get our body into an insulin resistance crisis because it also affects our brain. And then back to that deep nervous system support. That nervous system for our brain is so essential. So if we could just do one or two of those things, that's going to help your brain. And that's going to hopefully stave off dementia and Alzheimer's, because women are twice as likely to develop Alzheimer's or dementia. And it's because we've lost that neuroprotection of estrogen that it provided for us in those years leading up to menopause.
I have two questions there. One, thank you for highlighting that our creation of our Alzheimer's and dementia can oftentimes be in midlife. Guys, midlife is 30s, 40s, the whole middle. We are creating our diseases that are later on. This is why I talk about reducing inflammation like here and now, because we are setting up for our future. Part one of my question, you mentioned at the beginning, don't skip breakfast. And it's so interesting when you talk about nervous system and cortisol. I always work with people on my health. I have like what I call my dream team around me at all times, because I'm always looking to optimize. And I just started playing with an 11 to 7 fasting window. So I was like, well, we talk about intermittent fasting and it's supposed to be the best thing ever. So I have a lot of discipline, and I felt like I was using every muscle of discipline I had in my being to hold the 11 to 7 window. And this coach that I was working with was like, how about you try not holding it? How about we not let our bodies, I told her, I said, my body is screaming at me all morning. Can I have anything? And I'm always like, nope, 11, wait till 11. And today I had breakfast. There's no screaming. Because I ate breakfast before my workout. Imagine I'm just showing up for heavy lift workouts, pushing like boulders. And yet I gave the tank nothing. And I could tell I'm scraping the bottom of the tank. So I know adrenals and cortisol and all these things that I can feel in my body when I'm not doing the right thing for me. So can you speak into breakfast for women in midlife, perimenopause, or post? Because I think we oftentimes torture ourselves, not realizing the cortisol and what we could be doing to ourselves.
Yes, this is an unpopular opinion, but I'm always about pushing the boundaries and kind of going what science says, and also listening to your body at an individual level. I think we're starting to just now realize that long-term intermittent fasting is really not supportive for women's health. So I'm going to answer this question a couple of different ways, but I want to preface that everything that I recommend and that we do in our practice is from a female physiology lens. Does this support the adrenals? Does this support hormones if we're still making hormones, even in the chaos of hormones, or if we're on HRT? And so we have to always look at it through that female physiology lens. And majority of the research until recently, in fact, I think it was 1993, majority of research was done on men. And we were giving nutrition guidelines to women based on men's bodies and their physiology.
Drives me nuts.
Oh, yeah. And we could probably do a whole podcast on that, right?
We should, by the way. Let's do one on how all of science is based on a man's body. I'm a 5 foot tall Indian girl. I assure you I can't take drugs designed for a 6 foot white male. But
Exactly. And we could also talk about the history of the BMI. But anyway, so we have to remember that our women's, if we look at it through the lens, so the next time you're kind of given this new diet, because there's going to be a new diet. We don't know what it is. It could be that, it's carnivore, whatever that might be. There's going to be something else down the road. Always think, okay, female physiology lens. Is this hormone supportive? Does this support my adrenals? Does this support my thyroid? And vast majority of women in midlife, fasting is another extreme stress on the body. And majority of my clients do not tolerate it well, even though they've been told this is what they should be doing. Now, I don't want to discount the research that has gone into looking at going long periods of time without eating. I also don't want to discount that this happens in other cultures, and it happens as part of religious practices of going long periods without eating. But what I know on a day-to-day basis is that my clients, it does not help them. If we're already stressing a body, adding another stressor such as intermittent fasting is only going to make things worse. And remember, if the brain is going to perceive stress, which is intermittent fasting, it's going to perceive that as another threat, and it's going to increase the cortisol, and it's going to slow down your metabolism. So I really move away from intermittent fasting. However, I do think like a natural 12-hour fast is appropriate. So maybe your last meal is at 7 p.m. and you don't eat till 7 a.m. I think that helps rest the gut. It helps with that, clearing the insulin. If you're having any gut issues or inflammation, that's going to help with that. But this long-term intermittent fasting is really not beneficial for most of our clients in midlife. And also, I want to say one other thing.
Yeah.
I think at this decade in our life, we need to remove the food rules. This is another food rule for us to follow. This is another diet. No matter how you want to no matter how you want to put it, no matter how you want to tie it up with a pretty bow, it is another diet. I mean, so let's just get real about that. It's again telling a person when they can and cannot eat, and specifically women. And so I have a real issue with that.
Totally. Mic drop. Wow. Thank you. Like, it's so true. We're told so much and we fight so hard with ourselves. And it's interesting. I shouldn't say it's funny, because it's interesting as someone in health. I'm vegetarian, so short of eating like meat, I try everything. I love being a guinea pig. Like I have supplements all the time, and I'm testing like a new ashwagandha, and I do all sorts of things. And it's interesting because I'll go pretty far in any health idea, but I'll stop just short of breaking my own rules. And I have a rule in Ayurveda. We teach the 12-hour fast. We teach that 12 hours is perfect. It's ideal. Just give your body a 12-hour rest. That's enough. And that we don't have to push it so much farther. It's interesting, when I do break my rules, my whole being is going to fight back just as hard with me and say, hey, my next question to you is estrogen. So many of us in this day and age are estrogen dominant. We're forming these fibroids, we're forming these cysts. And I told my functional medicine team in 2020, I started really working deeply with functional medicine. I was like, something is up, and I want to make sure in a pandemic, I have a system that's going to really defend me. Let's do the work. And what came up was, finally, we did a Dutch test, and I have postmenopausal progesterone.
Okay.
And I have healthy, great cycles. I'm like a healthy, vibrant, still fertile woman. So it's interesting. I wonder how many of us are running around with estrogen or progesterone so way off, and then not getting the support we need. So will you speak into that and how it plays out in perimenopause and post? Because I think most women might not realize that estrogen dominance is a thing, and then how it affects you through this next journey.
Absolutely. Let's talk about what a cycle looks like pre-menopause. So let's talk about the 30-year-old woman, for example, a woman that doesn't have PCOS or something that might cause maybe higher androgens. And I'm going to be a very brief overview of our cycle. So my joke is always, welcome to class. You're about to receive the hormone education you did not receive.
Thank you.
So our first half, we're going to talk about a quote unquote normal-ish cycle, which is 28 days. Day 0, which is the first day of your bleed, to day 14, you're going to have a surge in estrogen. Estrogen is then going to drop, and then it's going to signal the egg to drop. You are having a period to anticipate pregnancy. Whether or not that is your goal, that is what's happening in the body. So estrogen drops, you drop your egg, and then it realizes there's no sperm to fertilize. So then it signals a rise. Excuse me. Let me back up. So I'm getting ahead of myself. So estrogen, we drop at day 14. That's roughly when we ovulate. If we do not ovulate, we do not make progesterone. But let's say in a premenopausal woman, she is ovulating. So then she has this surge in progesterone from day. Usually progesterone peaks around 19th day or maybe your 20th day of your cycle. And then, of course, it starts to go down again, anticipation for that next monthly bleed. What's happening in these perimenopausal years is that one of the first things that you're going to notice, one of the first symptoms that you're like, something is changing, is you're going to have low progesterone symptoms. And what does that feel like? That's feeling more anxious, maybe not able to deal with stress like you used to. And now remember, if you're in your midlife, stress is like coming on, like just coming on. So now you're not able to handle stress as much as you could do. You're not sleeping that well. Because progesterone is your calming hormone. It's actually one of my favorite hormones. If I had to pick one, it might be one of my more favored ones. You're not sleeping as well. You're not as calm. You're not able to handle stress. You're also getting a sluggish thyroid because progesterone also supports our thyroid. And so what we're having is this estrogen and dominating, or it's higher in relation to progesterone. Now, you still may be having some decline in your estrogen, but it's still higher in relation to progesterone. So estrogen is a hormone that helps it. You want to think of estrogen as our growth hormone. Growth in bones, growth in the uterine lining, growth in other things. But what we don't want is too much growth, right? You want the Goldilocks amount. And so what progesterone does is it comes in and it tames estrogen. But what's happening in these perimenopausal years is you're getting these huge fluctuations in estrogen. And if you're not ovulating, because you have to ovulate to make progesterone, which is what happens in perimenopause, you're not making progesterone or you're making very little. So this is what's setting you up for this estrogen dominant type symptoms. And those symptoms are increased anxiety, mood, like depression, anger, rage can happen, breast tenderness, fibroids, because if you aren't having progesterone to protect the uterine lining, then you're getting these growth of fibroids. So fibroids do become very common at this time of year. You can have very, very heavy periods. You can have clotting, things like that. And of course, the weight gain that tends to happen. So that is why this estrogen dominance is happening at this time of our life. So another really great analogy they like to say is you want to think of estrogen as growing the grass and progesterone as cutting the grass. So again, when we are not ovulating, which happens during perimenopause, you are not going to make your progesterone, but you're still making your estrogen until you get much, much closer to menopause. So this is a lot of why this chaos sets us up. And I do think the earlier stages of the perimenopausal years are almost more neurological in nature because it starts off with the more anxiety, not sleeping well. And then it kind of and then it gets things start getting a little bit more intense as we go.
I don't even know what to say to that. I'm like, oh my God, that explains a lot. You know, if you're really good at lifestyle, I think you can actually mitigate so much of what you're talking about. Like the minute I feel too stressed, I'm like, ashwagandha, let's go. Oh, I need Brahmi. So I have like the whole Ayurvedic herbal toolkit at my disposal and I design teas accordingly. So it's so funny that you said that because I made deep sleep tea first because I was like, I need to sleep better. Okay, I made my tea. I solved that problem. Okay, well, everyone's complaining about hot flashes, night sweats. And guess what? I'm in perimenopause. I'll make a tea for that. So I did that one. But then recently I was like, I get home and after school is tough. Like I already finished this great business day. I got to meet the coolest people in health and wellness. I have my own podcast. I'm on podcasts. Like the day is beautiful. And then I'm really hungry. Like there's a switch over at 4 or 5. And either I support myself or I don't. And that's actually a big decision is like tea and a snack, or are we not eating snacks based on food rules that we should not have for ourselves as women? But all of a sudden that afternoon, I needed something to start winding down. I could tell that I was hitting home life at 5th gear and and my kids are down in 3rd gear. And if I don't down step myself to that speed, the clashes are too big. Not to get too personal, but if anyone has a 10 and 13-year-old in life,
I can relate.
Teen and teen, you're like, hi, can we just be loving, kind humans? Like, what's but you're in battle with these people trying to get them to do homework and just eat basic things. And so I built a tea called Unwind Tea for me because I was like, I need like a triple ashwagandha, rhodiola, schisandra. Like I need all my adaptogens. And I told Maria at my office, I was like, 1 cup of tea doesn't cut it. I have to take 2. Like I have to double dose adaptogens. And so it's so interesting that you're talking about it from the estrogen progesterone standpoint. If you're not supporting yourself with these hormones, you might be suffering at a level that you just didn't have to suffer. So do you work with patients on hormone replacement therapy or guiding them? Because I think as women, we've been told a lot of misnomers around like our hormone health. And the sooner we get support on board, the sooner we can feel like ourselves. And the sooner we can feel like ourselves, the sooner we're going to be able to handle first of all, the stresses, but secondly, go do the things we need to do for ourselves, our exercise, our diet, our everything else.
Absolutely. We provide a lot of guidance. So obviously, because I'm a dietitian, I'm not able to prescribe. It's out of my scope of practice, but we spend a lot of time, whether it's within our modules, whether it's in our group coaching or our one-on-one, educating on hormone replacement therapy. So we talk, first of all, about the history of HRT and how it's a very tumultuous history. Let's just start there. The WHI study that came out in 2002, the Women's Health Initiative, it was not done well. It was not well designed. It was flawed. I won't go into all of the details because that will take quite some time, but I will say this, that the Menopause Society, which used to be known as the North American Menopause Society, has come out to actually have a statement that said that that study was flawed, and so has the WHI.
Good.
So we have, again, lots of competitive opinions. We have doctors that aren't trained or aren't even comfortable or really don't understand what's happening in menopause. So this is something that's important for your listeners and your community to understand, is that most practitioners, even your OBGYN that delivered your beautiful babies, has very little training in menopause. Yeah. And because of just the system, the way it's set up. So we do spend a lot of time talking about hormone replacement therapy. What we are finding now at the date of this podcast is that HRT works better as prevention versus treatment.
Sure.
And what we're understanding too more and more is that it's not just, and that's in terms of risk, in terms of side effects. But I cannot emphasize this enough. You have to work with a qualified practitioner. Correct. If you do not work with a qualified practitioner, you may not feel good. You're going to have side effects. You need somebody that's supportive, that can understand, because HRT it's not like a crock pot. You can't just set it and forget it. Like you do have to go in for monitoring. You do have to make sure that your levels are where they need to be. You do need to make sure it's helping your symptoms. And I get asked this all the time. In fact, we have a quiz on our website that says, how do I know? It's called, actually, it's not your mother's menopause, but it's like, how do you know if I'm in perimenopause? I get this question all the time. And it's all these symptoms that are coming up, and you don't really need to take a blood test. So if you can go to your doctor and say, I'm not sleeping anymore, I'm gaining weight without changing anything, I'm having crazy anxiety, my periods are getting heavier, I have breast tenderness, things like tinnitus. I mean, there's all these other symptoms that we don't talk about, like tinnitus. You can feel like your skin is crawling. Maybe you can't see as well at night driving like you used to. There's all these other symptoms that are, I'm in one of those too.
I cannot see at night.
They should go by your symptoms. They do not need to go by a blood test or anything like that. So
it's interesting. I've had a couple of different experiences. So anytime I'm going to pursue something that's big for my health, I seek out multiple opinions so I can ascertain what my opinion is. So I went to one practitioner who's like, look, I can prescribe it to you. I need a mammogram and a vaginal ultrasound and a bone density scan. And I was like, whoa, this is a lot of testing. I don't believe in over testing. You have baselines on me. I don't understand. So I left that practice over that issue because I was like, no, I don't agree. Then I went to a different practice and they were like, oh, we require mammogram baseline. Of course, we need that before we start doing hormones to you. And I was like, my God in heaven, like, I don't want to do that. And it's so interesting to look at like how everyone practices and how they approach it. And the second practice was like, I'm not going based on a Dutch test. We don't consider that clinically applicable, relevant. I don't remember the word they used. They said, we're going to go based on a blood test. So then they did my blood test and they were like, oh, you're right. You have 0 progesterone. I was like, okay. I still have to go. It's like, you want me to do 5 steps to get this thing that I know I've needed for like a year now. Mm-hmm. It's not easy. Somehow it's not simple yet. So how do you
shouldn't have to convince your doctor that you feel a certain way, and you shouldn't need a test 100% to tell somebody that you feel that way.
Yeah. It's like a whole journey. And I find women around me are like, I don't have time for all this. Like I need it simpler. So when it comes to that journey, how do you guide women on how to go forward?
Yes. So we provide women like talking points. So sort of like I was telling you, come to your doctor with your symptoms. If we're located in Atlanta. So if we have clients that are here in Atlanta, I have a roster of physicians so we do both. We do both doctors with conventional medicine, because if we have clients who are like, they have to take my insurance, this is the route that I have to take, we send them that way. If we have clients that are able to work with an integrative practitioner, I have a list of integrative practitioners here that we can send them. In the event that they don't have that, we will send them to the Menopause Society. Actually has a list of providers that you can find based on your zip code. So we really work with our clients trying to find a qualified practitioner. And there are apps as well that we can recommend that you can actually order HRT, and it's just all through telehealth. Anyway, so we start there. We help them, give them talking points. We let them know what is not true. Like, you can be on hormone replacement therapy longer than 5 years. A lot of doctors will say that you can only be on this for 5 years, and that if your doctor's requiring a bunch of testing, then you need to go the other way. Or if they're just saying, I don't do that, or I don't agree with that, or whatever, we're just like, you find a new doctor. So we really help them, guide them through that process, help them be their own self-advocate, and empower them through this process. And also just let them know, like, no, these are the facts. Like, you can start with, progesterone and estrogen. You can even start layering in testosterone. A lot of our clients do both estrogen, progesterone, and testosterone, because here's the thing, is that we can work with our clients on feeling better, working on their foundational health, eating, whatever that might be. But sometimes if that isn't enough and you have worked with a qualified practitioner to help you through that process, you might need to bring in hormone replacement therapy. You might need to start that. It just depends. And there isn't one way to do something. There isn't one way to do this. There are multiple ways to do this journey. And so it's important for women to know.
I love that you mentioned that, because when it comes to even testosterone, so many times we're told, like, no, you don't want to mess with that. I told my acupuncturist probably almost 10 years ago, I said, I have very low testosterone. And I said, I'm a very self-motivated person, so I can push myself through anything that's hard, but wouldn't it be nice if I actually had the right amount of testosterone on board, so that self-motivation and pushing to exercise and do these things and build muscle was supported? She's like, no, you never want to take testosterone from the outside. No. And I thought, sometimes we need to always go and get that second opinion, third opinion, because our bodies are bio-individual. And even the conversations I've had this week with health coaching is like, hey, you are different. Do you realize what you do for a living? Do you realize that not everyone sits on TV and cameras all day, teaches? Like, maybe your brain needs a little different fuel than everyone.
Right. Exactly.
We're different. So it's so interesting. So yes, will you share more on that?
Yes, I will. So what I try not to tell women, you have to do this way or you have to do it. So again, it's that bio-individuality, it's that journey, what's going to work for them. What is their own health history? They don't necessarily, you can have like breast cancer in your family history, but if you yourself does not have breast cancer, it's really about your own health history. Even down to like how much alcohol you might be drinking. If we're drinking, if we're having that daily glass of wine, what I tell our clients is, if you're exploring HRT, you have to understand that your gut health has to be working, because that's how we clear our estrogen, is through our liver, gallbladder, and our stool. Alcohol temporarily raises your circulating estrogen. So we have to look at this as an individual. And what is your outcome? What are you seeking? Are you seeking longevity? Are you seeking brain health? Are we seeking cardiovascular, bone? Are we just seeking more immediate symptoms? I'm having hot flashes, I cannot sleep, or my anxiety is terrible. So it's really, really down to the individual. And I always say there isn't one way to do that. So majority of our clients, what we'll do is we kind of present them with pros and cons, or, you can go this avenue, we can go this avenue, all the while supporting their foundational health, supporting their gut health, supporting their nervous system, making sure that they're eating enough. And then hopefully while we're working with them, they have actually sought a provider, have actually spoken to them, and have come back to us to say, Okay, this is what I'm taking. This is what I'm starting on. I'm starting with the estradiol patch, and then I'm going to layer in progesterone, or my doctor says, we're going to start with testosterone. So we really have to figure that out. You cannot replace hormones through food and diet. Not at this stage, it's not coming back. Our ovaries are backing out. Yeah. It's not going to come back. So I tell my clients, I'm like, if you seek hormone balance in midlife, you're going to lose and you're going to drive yourself crazy. So don't seek hormone balance. So what we do is we reduce the chaos. What can we do to support you? And you kind of have to look at it a multi-pronged approach. You have to look at it from foundational health that we've been talking about, nutrition, appropriate supplementation, and then initiate HRT if that's what we're ready for. And it's just taking the fear and just trying to help our clients really find their best path for them, not with their neighbor, not with their friend, not with their family member. What is your best path? And to also understand that we've come a long way with hormones. And another thing that women don't realize is that there's actually more hormones, synthetic hormones in birth control than there is in HRT.
Wow.
And so so it's just this whole, it's a lot.
That's an interesting point right there. There's more synthetic hormones in your birth control. Ladies who've been taking them for decades and decades. I took birth control in my very younger years, and then I was like, I don't need it. But then in HRT, and here we fear HRT. And really it's just a different level of support of yourself from like 40 to 90 that can give you the life you want, the level of vibrancy you want. Because it's interesting, lately I've been presenting at conferences like medical conferences and longevity conferences. And when I read the longevity science, I'm like, oh my God, aging is like aging is inevitable. It's how you want to age that is the question. And Absolutely. I know for me, I want to keep all of it. I want to keep my vibrancy, my brilliance, my brains, my beauty, all of it. Period. End of story. And I'm happy to reach into any toolkit. So I'm so glad that you are there to educate and give these 101 classes that many, many, many people need, myself included. I learned in this podcast, and I know I'm going to need a part 2 with you because you are epic. And I love diving into women's health topics in this way. It gets me so excited because I'm like, let's share the tools. Let's tell every woman she has so many choices and there's so many options, and we just need to be empowered, advocate for ourselves. So before we wrap up the podcast today, will you share how people can find you?
Yes. So you can find us at perfectlyportionedwellness.com. You can also find us on Instagram at perfectlyportionedwellness_. You can send us a DM. You can send us an email. You can also find us at info@perfectlyportionedwellness.com. And we host twice a month a live group training. So I encourage you to sign up on our email list to find out about them. You can go to our Instagram page, check out our stories. This is where we really can get into more of the nuances and get into more of what is happening at this time of our life. We can live a third of our life past menopause, and we want to thrive. And there's no reason that we can't thrive and come into our own and actually feel better than we did in our 20s. We just need the right tools.
I love that. Thank you for that final message today. Yes. You are amazing. I'm so glad we got connected. And I know we have many more things that we're going to do together.
Yes, we do. Thank you.
So thank you for joining me today.
Thanks for joining me for this episode. Check out our sponsor, Fusionary Formulas, the potent turmeric supplement used by doctors around the U.S. for patients with pain and inflammation. www.fusionaryformulas.com. I'm your host, Dr. Shivani Gupta. For more, visit shivanigupta.com. Subscribe to this podcast in Spotify or Apple Podcasts. Click the follow button or subscribe in any of the apps that you use. That's all I've got for you on the Fusionary Health podcast this week. You have the power to transform your health and achieve vibrant health starting today.